Kia ora koutou. I'm Nairi Dixon, and I'm the chair of Alzheimer's New Zealand. Thank you for joining us for this Alzheimer's New Zealand Election 2020 discussion about the Dementia Action Plan and the need for government action on the looming dementia challenge facing New Zealand. Sorry we're not doing this event live and in person, but needs must in this COVID world. I'd say most of you who have joined us tonight understand the severity and the scale of the dementia challenge. Dementia affects nearly every Kiwi family at some point in some way, nearly 4 out of 5 of us. The number of us with dementia will nearly triple by 2050, costing the country around $5 billion a year. So let's put that into some kind of perspective. That's about the same amount of money New Zealand earned from our total meat exports in 2019. And those exports accounted for almost 14% of the country's total exports. So, on top of the terrible human toll caused so many people and families by dementia, and look, we can't stress the significance of that enough. There is also a massive fiscal impact. Unless we do something about it, we need to do it now. And that's why we're here this evening. We want to hear what the major political parties will do about dementia and whether they'll implement the Dementia Action Plan when they're in government. So what is this plan? The Dementia Action Plan is a collaborative effort by the dementia sector, led by the 3 national NGOs, Alzheimer's New Zealand, Dementia New Zealand, and the New Zealand Dementia Foundation. We wrote it basically because nobody else did. The need for a plan of some kind is overwhelming. Dementia affects hundreds of thousands of New Zealanders now. That's not just people living with a diagnosis, but their family and whānau. And it will affect hundreds of thousands more people as our population ages. There's no treatment, there's no cure. And if you're diagnosed with dementia in New Zealand at the moment, good luck, because support services are woefully inadequate and underfunded. Hence the need for the Dementia Action Plan. It's based on the best research and the best practice. It reflects the views of people actually living with dementia and their care partners, and it is well supported within the dementia sector. It tells everyone, including our politicians, what people affected by dementia need to live their best possible lives. So this is our plea from the dementia sector. We've done what we can do by producing the plan. We now need urgent action by government. People living with dementia cannot be forgotten yet again. And so that's what we're hoping to hear about tonight. So without further ado, enough from me. Let me hand over to the moderator for tonight's discussion, Dame Kerry Prendergast. Kerry completed 3 terms as the Mayor of Wellington. She is currently chair of the New Zealand Film Commission and has had many roles, including chair of Tourism New Zealand and the Environmental Protection Authority. Kerry is also one of Alzheimer's New Zealand's champion for dementia. She was here hosting our 2017 pre-election political forum as well. It's great to have you back, Kerry. Welcome.
Thank you, and thank you, Nairi. So good evening. I'm moderating tonight's discussions and making sure our participants are very skilled politicians time and stay on topic. So because we don't have a lot of time, our politicians are people, let's get started. I'm going to introduce our guests tonight. we have, I think Michael joined now. Michael was on the Labour Party, Parliamentary Friends Dementia Group. Tracey Martin, in her capacity as New Zealand First spokesperson for seniors. We have Julianne Genter and her Green Party spokesperson, and we have Maggie Barry from the National Party. Her is alongside Michael of the Parliamentary Friends Dementia Group. Now, each of our political invited to us several about their parties for implementing the Dementia Action Plan. You'll find their responses on the New Zealand website. If you haven't seen them, view them at this, which should come up on the screen now. And I'll just pause a second so that you have time to write that down and take a photo. Okay, so let's get underway. We're going to start by giving 2 minutes to tell us what their party about the Dementia Challenge and about implementing the Dementia Plan if they were to form the government. Following that, we're going to ask them to answer questions in the dementia sector. And then we're wrapping up dead on so the MPs can get back to their parliament. Having said that, both Michael and Tracey leave us about 5 to 7 for other appointments. In mind, we're going to start with Michael and then move on to Tracey. So, Michael, what expert is yours? And we don't have a picture of Michael. You have to turn your video on. Maybe he's not there. So do that. Tracey, what go to you? And you've got 2 minutes. So what I'll do is I will 30 seconds, and then I'll say that's enough, or I'll do this. Go.
So Michael's just unmuted himself. Do you still want me to start, Kerry?
Okay, but I can't see him.
Okay, all right. So until you can see him, that means he's not there.
I'm sorry, I am here, but I'll let Tracey go first.
Oh, thanks, Michael.
I've got a video problem.
Okay. So first of all, thank you for this opportunity. So I come to this conversation, yeah, sure, as New Zealand First spokesperson, but actually as the granddaughter of a grandfather who suffered with dementia and who participated in his care. At a time when we didn't have things like the village in Rotorua or other facilities that had started to adopt some of the Scandinavian models to show us how much better we could do in looking after those that we loved who were suffering from dementia. So I've got 2 minutes. In October 2019, as part of a visit overseas, I went and sat down with Greg Shaw from the International Federation of Aging, and that helped to inform the policy that I'm about to tell you about. New Zealand seniors across the board are not represented well enough in this government or any government prior to it. We must take the Office of Seniors out of MSD and turn it into a ministry for seniors. They will represent 1/5 of our population by 2036. And I'm sure Maggie will bear witness to this, that as ministers for seniors, both she and I will have had to continue to raise the flag for seniors in government departments across whatever government is in play, because officials, when they're talking about employment or health or whatever, do not necessarily, just as a given, identify the issues for seniors. And dementia, as you've mentioned, is one of those issues. So not only do we need a separate ministry for seniors, we need a commissioner for seniors, so that they would have the same powers as the Children's Commissioner, the ability to advocate outside and independent of government, but also the ability to do monitoring on some levels around care facilities. I do think the Ombudsman keeping his current or the recent powers around monitoring dementia wards is a good thing, but I think there needs to be somebody going further on a daily basis.
About
That's it. Oh, well, sorry, those are the big things, but there's more.
No, you've got 30 seconds.
Oh, 30 more seconds? Okay. If we're talking about the workforce, we need greater diversity in the workforce. We need a lot more carers to actually be funded at an appropriate level, and that includes home care, dementia care inside villages like the village in Rotorua and other facilities. And we need to make sure that the diversity across that sector of carers can speak the language, the heritage language of those who are actually going to be needing that care in the future. Thank you, Kerry.
Thank you, Tracey, and thank you for both sharing some personal insights and also New Zealand First position. So now we'll go back to you, and it's really nice we can see, and thank you for joining me. And at 30 seconds, I'll give you a little window, and then this when you've 2 minutes. Is that okay? So you'd like
that's pretty definite.
It's pretty definite. There you go.
Look, thank you, Dame Kerry, and just acknowledging my other colleagues and everyone from the sector who's on this forum. Look, my experience with dementia has been both personal through 2 very close members of my family experiencing dementia in recent years. And it's also been through this cross-party work that we have done with the Friends of Alzheimer's cross-party political group over the last year. I think everyone who's on this forum agrees that the issue of dementia is one that we as a parliament need to take more seriously and that we need further government on, action on from government. I want to commend the sector on the development of the Dementia Action Plan. I think we now have brought together the expertise that is there in our communities and in the sector, and we've got a pathway forward to dementia care that will enable people, as you say in the plan, to be able to live their best lives, and that should be a right of citizenship for everyone in New Zealand, no matter what stage of life they have and no matter what conditions they might be dealing with. So I think as a pathway for us, that is absolutely exceptional. The Labour Party will be releasing its policy, its broader policy manifesto, including our policy on dementia issues in the fairly near future. So I'm not able to quite go into exactly what that policy will be, but I do want to give everyone who's watching here confidence that we take this issue seriously, that we take the Dementia Action Plan seriously, and that we're looking very closely at how we align our policy to the work of the Dementia Action Plan that has been developed by the sector. I think it needs to cover all of those 4 priorities that are mentioned in the Dementia Action Plan. I've been really close on the whānau side, so ensuring that whānau are included, ensuring that we have that focus on prevention. That was news to me when I heard that through the Friends of Dementia group, that we can actually have a significant prevention approach. Greater acceptance in communities, knocking down the stigma that's there, and strengthening leadership across the sector. Those are things that we believe are right, and we'll be focused on them in our policy.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you for outlining Labour's position and being you accepted our action plan. Thank you. Now I'm going to move and before I can you mute, please. Can you mute? Put on your mute button, Maggie.
Me?
Yeah. I've had a text telling me to tell you that. And now I'm going to move to Julianne, and you're going to have to unmute before you speak, but you'll know that. You've got 2 minutes, same rules. Thanks very much, Julianne.
Tēnā koutou katoa. On behalf of the Green Party, I just want to thank all of you for organising this meeting and for raising the issue. And like Michael before me, just acknowledge the work that's gone into the Dementia Action Plan. From a Green Party perspective, everyone has a right to the healthcare services they need. And it's our responsibility as a society to make sure that we have sufficient resource as we have a growing population and a population whose needs are changing, that we can continue to fund those services. And also, I think just recognizing the health across all of government portfolios. With dementia, a lot is not fully understood. We do need to do more research on that. There are some links to environmental factors potentially, like lifestyle, exercise, diet, even possibly air pollution. And there are other Green Party policies that would help address that, because we want to support healthy, happy cities. Reducing air pollution is a no-brainer. Making cities that are more welcoming for people of all ages to move around on foot or by public transport will be beneficial right across our society, and could also help ensure that we have communities that can support people who are living with dementia, and hopefully help improve the prevention and early diagnosis. And that's, of course, been identified in the action plan that early diagnosis is incredibly important. I just want to make one point. Having been in government, we all aspire to have the very best public services and infrastructure for New Zealanders. And the reality is that for us to achieve that, we need to make sure that everyone in New Zealand is pitching in to the ability that they can. And I do believe, and the Green Party has proposed a comprehensive plan for raising new revenue to help address poverty and to help provide greater services through things like a progressive income tax and a wealth tax.
Julian, thank you very much, and I really commend you for raising the research issue, because we can't do it on our own, but we can certainly partner with other countries, but it needs money, so it needs a commitment from government, so thank you. So now I'll move to Maggie. You can unmute, and we look forward to hearing what the National Party do. Maggie.
Thank you. Am I unmuted successfully? Yes, good. All right. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you to the sector for doing such sterling work on the action plan. I think the 5-year time frame is excellent. National would make the Dementia Action Plan a health priority. There would be a dedicated funding pathway under Vote Health. And I think that the significance of that will be recognised by some of you as being not only funding that's ring-fenced, and a pathway that's guaranteed, and that could be up to $1 billion over 5 years. This is not going to be cheap, but it needs to be at that level, we believe, for this to have an opportunity to succeed. So the reducing the incidence of dementia, as others have said, is a very important aspect. The cognitive stimulation, the identification very early, these are very important matters. My life too has been touched by dementia with my mother, and I spent a lot of time in those early years trying to figure out just what was going wrong with her. And so I think the level of awareness that needs to be applied to this, and you've touched on it in the 4 objectives about building, accepting and understanding communities. And I would just like to talk about one of the people that to me has had a profound influence on the way I've looked at this, and that was at the Alzheimer's conference. In fact, at several conferences, Edie Mayhew, who many of you will know from Australia. So she died last week, but one person doing a dementia-friendly sensory walk, Bigger Hearts Dementia, turning Ballarat into a city that understands and is dementia-friendly, is the general area of travel that National wants to go down with dementia.
It's perfect, thank you, Maggie. And could I say, I know you've been involved a long time, and I think the first time I met you, I was talking about your mum, so I know how you are. So thank you. And now we're going to open the session to questions from our audience. I've just got a few rules before we go back and ask some directed questions to our members of Parliament tonight. So if you, as a member of the audience, want to ask a question, please type it into the comments section of the video, and it'll arrive on my screen and I'll ask it on your behalf. We have limited time. We want to get through as many questions as possible. So type your question, indicate which MP you would like to have it answered by, and keep your question as short as possible. And please remember that a question should be a focus on policy issues. We won't be taking questions involving someone's personal circumstances or situations involving individuals. Now, to our MPs, while I'm waiting for those to come through, we're looking for you to keep your answers to a minute. And so far, it's been going very well, so we can get through as many questions as possible. And so with that, I'm going to pull rank and ask the first question, and these are ones that were prepared early, and we have one for each of you. The first one on behalf of Alzheimer's New Zealand Advisory Group of people with dementia and people who are care partners. And the first question is going to go to you, Julianne. COVID-19 has shown rapid changes in policy are possible. Meantime, we've worked for years to get better community support for people with dementia and their care partners. The sector has now even drafted an action plan. What do we have to do to get better support for some of the most forgotten people in our country?
I just want to acknowledge the important role of caring in the economy, and that we need to be supporting people to do that real work of caring for people, whether it's for young children or people with dementia or people with disabilities. That is incredibly important, Mahi. This government has gone some way to addressing some of the issues around family carers, but I don't believe that applies to people who are caring for those with dementia as opposed to other types of disabilities. I do think it's something, the Carers Action Plan is something that does need to be implemented. And I think it's, as I said earlier in my opening remarks, I think the main constraint on this is just the amount of funding that's needed across our health sector to support people. But there are those benefits when we support people to do this really important work. We all benefit. And just as we've seen with COVID-19, with the essential workers and supporting people through that time when they couldn't go about and do their normal business, our economy is better off for having made that investment. Our people are better off, and that we need to take that view in the next term of government.
Okay, thank you. I know it's tough answering such difficult questions in a minute. So now we're going to go to Tracey. Our second question is from Catherine Hall, Chief Executive of Alzheimer's New Zealand. Around 70% of people with dementia live in the community for most of their time with a diagnosis. The numbers keep growing, but the services are inadequate and funding has not changed in more than 10 years. Community organisations struggle to meet the needs with their contract funding only covering about 20% of the cost of the services they deliver. And even then, they're only supporting some of the hundreds of thousands of people living with dementia today. What changes will your party make to improve support to people living with dementia in the community? Tracey.
Thanks, Kerry. So first of all, one of the things that has been put into place by other countries who have a ministry for seniors is they take non-surgical services away from health. So you would have seen the Heather Simpson report and the problem that we've got with DHBs. That manifests itself in home care on the ground around New Zealand. So I believe that the Ministry for Seniors needs to manage the contract delivery of home care, not just for dementia, but for multiple other areas where our seniors need somebody to come in, either for respite or to actually live in and be available to them. That will give us the capacity of, one, a nationwide workforce plan. That will give us the capacity of multi-year contracts. That will give us the capacity to give consistency of care across the country. And I don't believe, I'm sorry, but I don't believe that unless we actually take this out of health, that it will get the attention that it needs.
Okay, thank you very much, Tracey. Well said. Now, the next question is for Michael. And it's from Shireen Maloney, Chief Executive or Executive Director, New Zealand Dementia Foundation. Question is, our population is changing rapidly and soon a quarter of us will be 65 or older. The health system is not well organised to cope. DHBs are focused on an old model of healthcare, and for people with dementia and their families, there are too many demands resulting from simple things: difficulty getting a diagnosis, difficulty navigating a complex system, lack of information about what support is available and how to get it. These things can be cheaply and easily fixed, but in spite of years of pressure from consumers and service providers, DHBs have not changed their approach to dementia care. We don't have the right services in place, and services that do exist are not what people need and are not flexible, or they're not available across New Zealand. What will you do to fix this, please?
Look, thank you, and it's a really, really good question. One of the things that stood out for me in the Dementia Action Plan, and amongst a range of different specific ideas, was the notion of 12 months post-diagnostic support for people who have been diagnosed with dementia, for them and for their families, to be able to navigate and work their way through the system. And I have to say, my own family's experience was that it was just so hard at a time that was distressing for you in the first instance. So I think that's a really good idea. But linking into what Tracey has said before, the current system and the structure of the system hasn't been working as well as it should have. That is why we've conducted the Simpson review. One of the things that you identify in the action plan. It's also in the Simpson Review, is this issue of inequality of services between city and town, between different ethnic communities. Māori and Pacifica in particular are highlighted. And we actually need a coordinated approach from the centre that ensures that there's an equality of access. That's what we want to deliver in our new term of government.
Thank you very much, Michael. And my last set question before I go to those that are coming in from the audience is to Maggie Barry. We estimate that and it's come from Anne Schumacher, Chief Executive Dementia Wellington. We estimate that 60 to 70% of all people with dementia are living in their own homes supported by a family carer. This might be a spouse or an adult child. Caring can be rewarding. Many family carers who are forced, isolated and low, anxious and just plain warning. Family carers need regular full respite so they can get a break when they need it. The respite situation is desperate, but it is like no one is listening. Many carers have health problems or disabilities, or also struggling with their own young family and work commitments. This problem is urgent and has important implications for the sustainability of the health system. What will you do to fix it? You need to unmute.
Me. I could only make out about 1 word in 5 of what you were saying, but I think that the general gist of it was around who cares for the carers and the incredible pressure that's on them. National's been examining other models of care. Clearly, people want to stay in their own homes for as long as possible. We absolutely support that, and smart technology and all of those other exciting devices that are coming on stream will help that. But the direction of travel we want to take it is Holkvalk, which is the village for dementia in Holland, which I went and saw last year. So these are themed houses where people are living in a flatting sort of a situation. Abbeyfield is another example, which occurs here in New Zealand. Tracey Martin has mentioned the village in Rotorua. There are a number of models of care where people are living in a home-like environment. There's a particularly good one in New Plymouth as well. So where respite care is required and where people need that break, I think that there are halfway houses, if you like, in between the time where they do need more advanced care. There does come a time when they need that. And so that model of care gives people the opportunity to plan and to look ahead.
Okay, thank you. You're all pretty well to the little rules we set out. Really appreciate it. I know it's not easy to time limits put on you. Now, the first question is, and I have someone who they haven't said who they want it to go to, so I'm going to give you all 30 seconds. Sometimes we hear that people who died from COVID-19 had dementia and were going to die anyway. Then there are the conversations about end-of-life choice. How do we avoid slipping towards an attitude that the lives of those with dementia or any pre-existing conditions somehow don't matter as much as others? How do we safeguard the rights of those who have no voice? Now, I'm going to start, we'll go back to the order we just did the questions. Julianne, you've been waiting the longest, and then I'll go through in the same order.
Well, I think it's a really excellent point, and that, is one of the reasons why I wholeheartedly supported the government's response to COVID-19, which put the lives of New Zealanders first. And of course, that has put us in an incredibly fortunate situation relative to many other countries in the world today. When it comes to end-of-life choice, I think that's quite a different situation, because that could never be applied in the laws proposed in the referendum could never be applied to somebody with a disability or dementia. It's only people who have a very clearly defined terminal illness and are very close to death to get some assistance in their final days, if that's what they choose, and it has a lot of safeguards built into it. But I do think we need to promote and protect the most vulnerable in our society.
Go, I think it was Tracey next.
Okay, first of all, the end of life choice referenda, that's for the voters. So the voters need to read it, they need to understand it, ask whatever questions you need to, and then you vote on it. I'm not going to give you my view on it. I'll make my individual conscience vote the same way they will. However, with regard to the disgusting statements that were made by some that don't worry about COVID because it only kills old people, We should call out ageism absolutely everywhere. And that was the ultimate display of ageism. So call it out like we would call out any other ageism, because they're all very flippant when it's not their lives they're talking about. And whether it's my 2 weeks or my 2 years, I'm not going to have anybody else decide that it's all right for me to go.
Well said. Michael.
Look, as with Tracey, I'll leave the issue of end of life to voters. I personally voted against it, but that's for people to decide in the referendum this year. Look, I think where we need to go with this issue is the human rights approach that's identified in the Dementia Action Plan. If you start from a human rights lens on this issue, you recognise the inherent dignity and worth of every person, regardless of their age or whatever condition they might be experiencing. And you can't go too far wrong there. But we do know this is a wider problem. We have pretty widespread elder abuse in our community. There is definitely an issue in terms of the way in which seniors are often stigmatised and kind of put in a box and told, your time's over, you don't have a voice. And I think there's a responsibility on all of us as community or political leaders to push back against that and to make sure that we have mechanisms. There are things like an aged care commissioner that's been spoken about that we're thinking very seriously about, and ensuring that the adequate funding and support is available, that people aren't forgotten about, especially those who may be suffering from conditions like dementia.
Okay, thank you, Michael. And now Maggie.
I have made no secret of my opposition to the euthanasia legislation because I am so concerned about people with dementia. The safeguards in the bill do not exist in terms of the time it takes to understand whether someone is able to decide whether or not they can make a decision of that kind. So one brief appointment and the next one on Skype isn't going to determine dementia. I worry a lot about that because I think coercion and elder abuse at the moment, some 70,000 New Zealanders a year say they're being abused. These are people over the age of 65. Elder abuse, I think, is the scourge that some ways it's like dementia. People don't like to talk about it. They don't like to admit that it's happening. To me, I'm very concerned that the level of elder abuse could escalate into forced euthanasia. Your hands come up over your face. Have you?
That was for me to for you to mute me.
Oh.
Right, that's 1 minute. But in fact, the next question is for you, Maggie. What additional support can we offer the family caregivers, keeping them out of rest homes as long as possible? And that was to Maggie.
I think the am I off mute? Yeah.
You're
sorry.
perfect.
Okay, I think that the issue with the carers, and we had a carers strategy that was released, I think, in about 2016 or so, which really, and that's young caregivers as well. So we need to be very aware of the extent of the workforce and the demographic part of it. So sometimes it's family members, sometimes it is a younger person who is in a caregiver role that then becomes more hands-on, if you like, as that person's needs progress. So younger people need to be properly supported. The apps and the way that the communication, forming little groups on Zoom occasions like this, all of that level of support, which we also do around the dementia caregivers, who are traditional in the health sector. I think that wraparound support from people who understand what it's like to live with dementia and to assist them is important. So I would like to roll out what we are doing with the Community Connects, which is where all of the groups that are responsible for older people talk together and provide information. And in communities like Napier, in New Plymouth and other places, it's working very well and led by Super Seniors champions.
Thanks, Maggie. So if I get you to mute, please, and Michael. Questions in County Manukau, approximately 70 rest homes and only 5 dementia care homes, which my mum is in. Question for Labour Minister, what plans does Labour have to increase this to meet future requirements?
Look, what we need to ensure is that there's adequate care and support in place. I can't give you a precise answer as to whether those numbers are exactly right or exactly what the number should be in terms of each facility. But I think, the point about the Dementia Action Plan and all the work that the sector has done over recent years is that we need a coordinated national strategy in this. If we just kind of leave it up to each individual district health board or locale, we're not going to get the right response and the right set of needs being met in different communities. So I think that's the path forward, is to have a clear strategy at the centre. But the other thing I'll just be really clear about is that it's all very well to have a clear plan and strategy, but there does need to be the resourcing sitting in behind it as well. And this goes to something that Julianne said. We actually need a government that will resource the sector properly, that isn't going to be hacking away at health and education, that actually believes that these are important public goods that we will fund properly. That's something that we've really tried to build up over the last 3 years, and something that will continue to do so. And we'll then work with the sector to make sure that the resource goes into the right place to meet the needs of people.
Thank you, Michael. Now I've got a question which hasn't been allocated to anyone, so I'm going to let, first of all, Julianne answer it, and then Tracey. It appears the focus is on people with dementia older than 65. With people with young onset dementia being brushed over currently, what sort of further support could be targeted toward those with dementia who are under 65? So a minute from you, Julianne, and then I'll go to Tracey.
I just want to speak about our Poverty Action Plan, which was released a few weeks ago. The Green Party's Poverty Action Plan has a policy in it that would transform ACC from being just about accidents to being an agency for comprehensive care, and that would support anyone of working age who cannot work because of being unwell or because of a disability, including early onset dementia, would provide them with support equivalent to 80% of their salary before they had to stop working. And I think transforming ACC in this way would go a long way. But of course, we have to do more to ensure that there is that ability to diagnose early and to provide other support. But there's all the information about that policy is available on our website if people are interested.
Thank you. And now Tracey.
I just need to pick up on something Maggie said first. There are no super seniors champions, and there was no funding or whatever for Community Connects when I took the Office of Seniors. So that's just not something that's happening at the moment. If I pick up on the question that you're talking about, I think it goes back to the conversation about research. It goes back to the conversation about stigma and fear, and it goes back to the conversation about awareness. So we are talking, because we think this is an old person's disease, and we know that the numbers predominantly, if we're talking percentage wise, we are talking that, it combines with an age demographic. But if we address those other things, that there is hope in, when you get a diagnosis of dementia, if we look at the research that they're doing in Japan around diet, and no, we can't cure it, but there is some really interesting research about slowing it down. We need to address the stigma so that people seek assistance, and let's just start talking about hope out the other side for those suffering from dementia.
Now, I'm mindful both Michael and Tracey, you need to leave in about 2 minutes. So Michael, we've had a question come in for you if you've got time to answer it. It seems as though the Simpson report will stop anything happening until the Ministry of Health and the DHBs have been restructured. I hope that's not true. That's my bit. We get this message from both Ministry of Health and DHBs. Can't do anything because of the Simpson report. This will take years. Dementia services are urgent. What will you do to create change now? It's a good question for you to finish on.
It is. Look, there's a recognition that we need change across the health sector. I don't think that anyone who's seriously engaged disagrees with that. So we are going to proceed with that piece of work. But that's not going to prevent anything being done in the meantime. We can do multiple things in government. So the commitment that we have is to continue working on issues across the health sector, including needs in the dementia area in the meantime. That's a commitment that I can give. The settings are not going to be frozen in stone until such time as we complete any reforms that do come out of the Simpson report. But I will just emphasise that point we started on, that we have got a fragmented health system at the moment, and this sector, probably more than any, benefit from a more coordinated approach of the kind that is recommended in the Simpson report. So I think that is important, but there is still work that we will be getting on with in the meantime. And as I said in my previous answer, we're committed to ensuring that the sector is properly funded, and that enables us to get on with some of this work and some of the priorities that you have identified.
So, Michael, can I thank you very much for coming with us, or joining us this evening, and Tracey as well. I know you both have other commitments at 7.
Can I answer that though, Kerry, before I go?
Well, if you've got time, quickly, yes.
Because I speak fast and I speak directly. If we wanted to create a seniors commissioner tomorrow, we could do so by reallocating the $8 million that currently funds the financial capability commissioner to really represent seniors. And once we actually have a seniors commissioner, we would be able to focus on the dementia action plan. We would be able to focus on better later lives. We would be able to start to shift some of that narrative around how this funding happens. So certainly we need to go forward with some of the changes recommended in the Simpson report, but there are things that could change tomorrow if you put New Zealand First back into government.
So thank you both, Michael and Tracey. It was a good way for both of you to finish. You got your points across clearly. We really appreciate you coming. You know, it's live streaming on Facebook, so there's thousands of people out there all getting ready to vote. So hopefully each of you, the 4 of you, have said something that resonates with people out there. But if you two would like to, if you have to go, and we'll carry on with Julianne and Maggie. Thank you very much, Tracey.
Best wishes all.
Thank you. So, Maggie, we have another question for you. What happened in Ballarat to make it dementia friendly, and how do you think it could be implemented here? Yeah.
Go. Okay. So in Ballarat in Australia, that's where Edie lived. So Edie Mayhew was a force of nature. She was diagnosed with early onset dementia when she was in her 50s, and she was an articulate advocate who participated in coming up with strategies, one of which was this Bigger Hearts Dementia Ballarat. So they made the city a safer place to be. So we call it age-friendly communities, which are in fact friendly for young people and mothers with prams and all of the rest of it. It's good for everybody. But the safety and the conversations, the dementia-friendly banks, dementia-friendly police courses that were run, probably the one that attracted a lot of attention, and it's amazing the difference an individual can make, is the sensory walking trail, which was a place where dementia people living with dementia could be the same as everybody else, smelling, sensing, walking. It broke down the barriers and the stigma and the things that are so damaging and isolating about people living with dementia, that sense of shame. So it was a holistic approach. They are working towards a compassionate city status. So watch Ballarat with interest, because they've moved from the dementia awareness to this next step, which is involving that much more holistic population, but not segregating dementia, locking it away, leaving people to their own devices, but bringing people together so the community can embrace the changes that they're going through. Okay, thank you. The next question, and I'll be on timing now, seeing there's just the 2 of you, so you can have a couple of minutes. So Julianne, some countries give a certain amount of money each month to people with dementia. It helps them pay for a carer and live relatively independently. Can we do the same in New Zealand?
Thanks for that. I do believe that we can provide the support to everyone who needs it if we work together, and if we're willing to ensure that everybody is, contributing, and so those who have the most contribute the most back to New Zealand, and we all do better when that happens. There is a plan to transform DSS, and that has a similar sort of approach, in that sense of, rather than specifying and having a really rigid set of services and supports for people, that we empower and enable people to make choices about a budget that they can use. I think it's really important that if we go down that route, that we're still ensuring that people have good working conditions and pay, that the carers are not being squeezed to fit into a budget, and so that therefore the people who receive the budget aren't having to make really bad choices. We need to make sure that the budget is sufficient to support their needs. I just wanted to say that I loved hearing about Ballarat from Maggie just now. It sounds really inspiring and exciting. And just a point that she raised that I would be particularly excited about is how like really good urban design would be good for our older people and good for our children, and ensuring that people aren't segregated. You know, if we can provide that sort of living to everyone, where there's a mix of ages and abilities, living in neighborhoods where they can support each other, that also helps enrich everybody's lives. And that's something I'm very passionate about.
I've got a question which I'm going to give you both the opportunity to answer. Significant exist for kuia, you hear me? Yes? Living with dementia, kuia and kaumātua living with dementia. Numbers of older Māori are growing much more rapidly than numbers of other groups. What would you do to older Māori can get access to support and services they need? So I'll go to Maggie and then Julianne.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. I'm sorry, it was a bit patchy, but it's about kaumātua and kuia, older Māori people. And of course, there are some sectors, 30% of the people who have dementia, they're women, are a higher proportion. And Māori and Pacifica communities as well, there would appear to be pockets where, for whatever reason, there are larger numbers of older Māori people and not so old as well getting it, which is why I'm so encouraged to hear about the stream of work that is going on to have a particular, not just a te ao Māori view of things, but also involving whānau and others to really find out what the families and the cultural components are of this. And if I could just broaden it out a little here into palliative care as well, because I think the way we choose to die, particularly when we have, you know, the cognitive development issues with people with dementia. So after a while, they can't tell you how they want to die. It's really important that all those conversations are had earlier in the piece rather than later, and that culturally they are appropriate, because I think there's a tendency to think that people will go into a hospital or a hospice situation, which may suit some but not all. And I think the taking that wider view and looking at Māori and Pacifica needs will also enable all of us to have a better and more holistic approach, because the one size doesn't fit all. And the sort of things we've been doing in the last 50 years or so with palliative care with people with dementia has not been best practice at all. That is a particularly difficult group.
Inequity for Māori and Pacifica in particular just exists right across every part of our society, very much across the health sector. And it's something that the Green Party is very committed to addressing, and also the government, I think, through the health and disability system review, just acknowledging that there has to be substantial systemic change if we're going to address this inequity. And it starts with recognizing that it exists, making sure that there are explicit strategies and action plans to counter it, and that there are the right people able to make the right decisions. And I do think whānau ora is an example of a different approach to providing support from government that has worked in some cases, and credit to the previous government, the national government who started that, and our government has carried on with that. And I think what's been recommended about really strengthening the ability for Māori and Pacifica to be at the heart of the decisions that we are making about our health sector and about health funding will take consistent work over a generation to address this inequity, and that will be true with dementia. This is every other part.
Okay, I've got two more questions and then we're going to have to call it to a close. So I'll go back to you, Maggie. Oh no, I'll go to Julianne, but you need to stay muted. Sorry, Maggie, but you are now. Julianne, you may feel you've answered this. It's sort of along the lines of what you were talking about. So if you want to add anything more, the question is stigma and discrimination are significant issues when it comes to dementia. What will you do to help make New Zealand more inclusive of people with dementia? So you sort of answered that, but if you want to add anything, you can, and then I'll go back to Maggie with the last question.
I think that it, as I was just saying, whether it's Māori and Pacifica or people with dementia, we have to just really be honest with ourselves about the fact that stigma and discrimination exist, and then put in place policies and plans that help us counter that. And, you know, as Maggie was talking about the city in Australia and the steps that were taken there, where there was education right across of police and others, and having really explicit policies that invite people with dementia in to be equal with everyone else, that's a great way to counter stigma and discrimination. But we can't, we can't let up or congratulate ourselves that we've dealt with that issue just because we have a policy or plan. It has to be a constant thing that we are reviewing as a government. But for me, I guess it always comes back to the idea that we need the health sector and the public sector to be well resourced enough to be able to support people in their communities.
So that's a very good segue into the last question for you, Maggie. You mentioned you would fund dementia care from Vote Health. The pool of funding is stretched now. How would you ensure there is enough for quality care for people with dementia? And what's being done to monitor dementia facilities? So I think maybe just to answer the first one first, about where the money's going to come from, and then how you're going to dementia facilities. Keep it for 2 minutes, because then we.
Okay, the issue around the funding has always been the problem. We need to be completely upfront about that. The dementia is going to be expensive because there are 70,000 or so of us living with it now. That will double within the next 30 years. So the funding needs to be with the person and needs to travel with them through their journey, which is why National favours the navigator system. So and the funding model needs to be through the DHBs, because that's what we've got at the moment. We can talk about the wholesale change of the District Health Board model and reducing the numbers of them and all the rest of it, but it needs to be done at a national level and imposed, and the DHB system at the moment doesn't allow that. I agree with what Tracey Martin said earlier, but I agree. I feel that the governance needs to stay with a minister. I was number 13 in cabinet, sitting around that table. That is the place where the influence needs to be felt. Having a commissioner outside of that political accountability process at the governance level, to me, risks not letting it work at all. So the financial side of things, and we've been looking at $1 billion over 5 years, that would be to fund around this action plan, the early diagnosis, the support at the community level, caring for the carers, respite care, changing the governance. It is far too fragmented at the moment, and I know it may seem a boring part of it, but dementia and Alzheimer's organisations, unfortunately, traditionally, have sometimes competed for the same funding, and it's better now than it has been in the past. But this plan and enacting the plan, I think, will make a phenomenal difference to the way that we deliver care for our most vulnerable and allow them to have meaningful lives and not put an enormous amount of pressure on their loved ones to keep looking after them. It can be done, but community nurse modelling is another thing that we want to do, which is part of ensuring that that funding doesn't get gobbled up by bureaucracies, but is delivered to the agencies that can then deliver the cognitive development therapy and all of the rest.
Thank you, Maggie. So if you'd like to mute, I want to wrap up and thank Julianne and Maggie for giving so much of your time. I know you've got to get back to the House. There's a huge interest in this area, and I think our politicians have got a really good sense of that this evening. Questions come in about workforce, and there wasn't time to answer that, but I can tell you, sitting on a publicly listed rest home provider in New Zealand, it's listed here and in Australia, the workforce issues are major, and that's something that I'm also lobbying on behalf of a board I sit on. There are not enough people in New Zealand to provide, and a huge 30% turnover of registered nurses in work homes. So it's another area for work to be done. I think it's fair to say that we all got an equally good sense of what the four parties here will do about dementia if they were in government after the election, and how they're going to respond to that dementia action plan. So thank you again, and I know Nairi has got some concluding words for us this evening. So again, if I can just thank you, Maggie, and you, Julianne, for being patient with the technology and patient with me, and thank you very much, and I'll hand over to you, Nairi.
Thank you, Kerry. Really appreciate your input this evening. Let me just start by thanking our political guests. We very much appreciate your time tonight, and certainly you've given the issue of dementia a lot of thought. So thank you. Thank you very much to our audience. You have been just as engaging as we hoped. Plenty of questions and some very searching ones, I thought. And thank you to my team at Alzheimer's New Zealand for organising this event. It's been a really important opportunity to underline the need in New Zealand for better dementia policy so that we can continue to work towards a dementia-friendly New Zealand. So the issue of dementia is an important one for all of us who have logged on tonight. It's also massively important for the hundreds of thousands of New Zealanders who are living with dementia, and to the many, many more who will live with it in the future. We've heard from our politicians. They all understand how big an issue dementia is. And personally, I'm very excited that we have heard some commitment tonight. I await with anticipation the policy announcement from other parties. I will be very disappointed if there is no commitment to working on that dementia action plan. But certainly very excited that all have made a commitment to work with us in the sector, which is what we need. With an election looming, lots of things are up in the air, and it'll be interesting to see how the land lies after September. I know Alzheimer's New Zealand and our parties our partners, Dementia New Zealand and the New Zealand Dementia Foundation, will be very keen to meet the new minister, whomever he or she is, and we look forward to continuing this discussion on this critical issue. I know the message will remain unchanged. People living with dementia and their care partners, their family and their whānau need more action, and they need more action now. The plan is the best place to start. In the meantime, thank you all very much. I wish you a very good evening, and I thank you all for your time and attendance. Thank you.